Hello and welcome to episode 5 of season 2 of Piano Lessons. Mr. Marc Piano, somewhere different today. Whereabouts are you?
Joining live on location in Zagreb, Croatia, Phil, where I've done a presentation to the University of Zagreb's Faculty of Economics and Business on the future of finance, the economy and humanity, blockchain, cryptocurrency, and AI. Mind-blowing, especially with this potential and some of the projects we're working on here at Harneys. Very exciting and really well received.
Fantastic. And they've given you a nice little outfit to wear as well, which is very exciting.
I chose this myself, I'll have you know. Well, with a bit of help.
And we are joined today yet again by a member of the H3 network, a slightly one you may have heard before, Josh McVey of, I believe, Harneys.
Yes, that's right. I believe the same, Phil. No, thank you very much for having me on the podcast. It's been a while in the making, hasn't it, Marc and Phil? So delighted to be here and jump in and talk all things crypto, blockchain, fintech, Web3, and unpack it.
I have said on previous podcasts that I'm intimidated by the person I'm speaking to when I begin to look at their background. Again, the same is true. We have an Olympian in our midst. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Sure. I mean, that is absolutely a wrap in itself. So thank you, Phil. But yeah, perhaps I'll give a bit of background to myself. So I initially started my legal career in Australia at a firm called Mallisons. But that, parking that legal trajectory for 1 minute.
This is boring.
Yeah, yeah, I did. I played professional football before I delved into the legal career, and I played in Australia professionally, and I also represented my country, Australia, at the Youth Olympics. So that was an honour and a privilege, as always, to represent your country. The plethora of lessons learned from being a professional in competitive sport is absolutely unparalleled, and it's obviously served as an excellent platform to delve into the legal career that we're calling boring. But no, I mean, yeah, and I suppose a little bit more background on myself to kind of bring us up to speed today. I started in Australia, as a transactional lawyer, advising on deals essentially out of Asia and Australia, and that was excellent. There was a period there where I found an extreme interest in all things fintech at the time, which seemed to be the angle on the market that we now know it. And at Mallisons, I joined the fintech team there and helped build the practice there. And then I found a real interest in the client side, and also how projects develop and how I might be able to lend my background to projects. So 2018 I started my own blockchain collective called Merkle, which was an excellent in the deep end type experience around all things from community channels through to token allocations, advising and also kind of spearheading from the client side, those angles. And then off the back of that, I made my first international move from Australia to Cayman in 2020. Helped build the fintech blockchain Web3 practice there, and then got a tap on the shoulder to go up to New York and really continue to do much more of the same thing, building transactional work, fintech work, effectively being the go-to lawyer on the New York East Coast fintech related work. So that was excellent. And then it brings us to the point where we are now, and very glad to have joined Harneys, and it's been an absolute pleasure to start with, and obviously work with both of you, and we're absolutely stride for stride, we're kicking goals, and I think we can chat about this, but it's been an absolute dream move for me, in a sense, to make the move to Harneys and to link up with excellent professionals, but also very client centric and commercial lawyers.
Why did you leave New York? That's the epicenter. That's the place to be. You're building out practice there. You got the tap on the shoulders and move. Why on earth did you come back to a small island? to come and do this sort of stuff from a very different perspective?
Yeah, and it's an excellent question, and I've thought long and hard about this as well, because like you say, it was a big move, right? Having been, offshore and then going onshore and then making the move back. And really what I put it down to is, especially right now in the crypto, blockchain, fintech, Web3 market, the offshore environment is becoming effectively its own lead counsel jurisdiction, which is a really interesting thing to unpack. And maybe for the listeners, that's kind of a legalese way of saying that the offshore jurisdiction is actually where clients are looking to form their structures and run certain operations out of. And it's very attractive. It's much more of a lead jurisdiction when you think about things like regulation onshore that's maybe causing friction points for clients. Then you have the offshore piece where we can be innovative around structuring. We can be innovative around, trying to meet the clients where they're at in terms of not only their cadence on their projects, but also where they are in the universe of jurisdictions and where they want to long-term set and effectively structure their ongoing operations from.
And we have plenty of client calls where it goes from, well, we've got a company onshore, but we want everything to be offshore. We want the token issuance offshore. We want the operations offshore. We want the revenue offshore. Sometimes that works, sometimes that doesn't, depending on the regulatory position. But then it's the interplay between the onshore, US, UK, wherever, anywhere that's not a small island jurisdiction. The offshore, which is almost like the hub for a lot of these projects. And then the DAO, depending on how you define it. You have this really interesting set of players all interacting with each other, delicate needles to thread from a legal and regulatory perspective. And offshore is very much the center of it all, across Cayman, BVI, Cyprus in some cases. How on earth do you bring your US perspective to that and then thread this needle with a very different set of considerations to anything dealt with from the US?
Yeah, I mean, and the upshot that I typically say to clients is I see it from both sides. And what you have is now having what we've built at Harneys and the specialist practice that we have, we've got solutions to what would have been, gating items or blockers for most clients. So we, in terms of adding value, seeing it both sides, I understand, at least from a US perspective, I understand the typical roadblocks there. And then being able to, on top of that, build out a very, fulsome practice of, well, we have solutions here, and it's not necessarily what you've been told that needs to fly in perpetuity. So we can meet you where you're at. And like you say, Mark, there's different players at hand here. We've got the DAO, we've got the token issuing entity, we've got, in conventional structures that we're setting up now, we've got Cayman Foundation. And all of these entities and structures do different things, and we help clients think about how do we actually apportion those activities to the relevant entity, and then how do we structure it for long-term governance to make it, not only a set and forget, but we want to help the client grow and we want to be their trusted advisor in an ongoing sense.
But Josh, you mentioned something there, long-term governance. That's an interesting term of art. What does that mean in practice from a client and lawyer perspective?
Yeah, so thinking about it from, a lot of people think about governance and at least offshore structures as off the shelf, set and forget. So sort of tying into the broader ethos of we're looking for the full package here and to assist and be a trusted advisor in an ongoing sense. We are effectively looking to structure projects with long-term governance in mind. And what does that mean? It means it's not set and forget. We need to understand the intricacies of what you, the client, are looking to do long term, and we want to put in effective measures from a governance perspective, whether that be your constituent documents, whether that be best practices from engaging with directors and kind of reflecting what the project needs to do and creating channels of communication between not only the project, the director, and legal advisors, but making that whole picture join dots and making the project speak to itself from a governance perspective. So that's what we're looking to do, as opposed to, if you wound the clock back maybe 5 years, that certainly wasn't the case.
I'm always fascinated to go back to sort of almost the history of these international financial centres, and when you look at the duration of the Cayman Islands, the British Virgin Islands, as what they've done, they've always been described as that essential plumbing of international finance, and everything that made it work throughout the years, throughout the many decades of the success of both jurisdictions, is playing through again and again. When you've got all of these are so vastly spread across international networks, across where the founders might be, across where the devs might be, across where the token holders might be, that there almost is no better answer than the true jurisdictions that found the way to solve this 50 years ago and are still solving for it now. And that comes from, yes, the tax neutrality that people often focus on, but that's rarely actually the conversation piece in these projects. It's more about the regulatory flexibility. It's more about the legislation that's so cutting edge and constantly evolving to keep up with the trends that makes this really, really interesting. And look at the Cayman Foundation Company, such a good example. It's becoming a bit synonymous now with these projects, but it wasn't invented for that purpose, but it was beautifully brought into this world and now sits so nicely in it. And I love that about what we can do. And to watch someone like you who has your talent come out of such an amazing firm in New York with such an opportunity and say, actually, this is the hub, this is where I want to be, is incredibly exciting for me. Will you look at the next 12 months? How do you see that playing through for what we'll be doing?
I see a lot more decentralization. I see a lot more of the industry looking for solutions in offshore jurisdictions, to kind of meet them where they are at in that respect. And I think you're exactly right, Phil. In at least the BVI in Cayman, we've got quite sophisticated virtual asset service provider laws, which are in certain jurisdictions that's still evolving. There is a degree of regulatory certainty, at least in jurisdictions in which we operate, which is often a really attractive proposition for early stage projects and projects that are looking to build out again that long-term governance and regulatory piece. So I see, in terms of the actual market, I've been seeing a lot of we're seeing a lot of zero knowledge proof work, a lot of different functions that are being integrated into project and functions that are being integrated into different layers. I also see, from a decentralization point, I think that we're going to see a lot of more activity from the DAO side. I think we're going to see a lot more, how do we use and build a community, and how do we, effectively use the funds that are built and grown within a DAO, and how do we, through our structure, appropriate or use those funds for the benefit of the community.
We're in a lot of Telegram groups, you and I, with clients and other lawyers, and discussing all these almost on a real-time basis. And we accept USDC, which is what we're one of the few service providers who do. We're set up, we're here, we understand the market, and we are at the point now where we've innovated to be a market leader, but we have to continue to innovate because that's exactly what the market does, and that's what the market expects.
Marc, you're obviously on your travels at the moment. Josh, I think you're about to hit New York for a couple of events too, for people that want to come and meet you.
I am, yeah. So I'll be at NFT NYC at the beginning of April, and then I'll also be heading to the AIMA Digital Assets Conference up in New York as well. So absolutely, we'll circulate my LinkedIn. You've got my email. I'll be there, and I'm really interested to see, just quickly on the NFT side, there's a lot of projects that are utilizing NFTs and commemorative components to it. So would love to speak to anyone about that. Exactly. Not just JPEGs.
and I will be there at Token 2049 in Dubai as well. So I think between the three of us, we are getting around the world in the same way that our nomadic clients do. And obviously, if there's anything any of us can do in person when we're there, please do get in touch. But Josh, thank you ever so much for joining us. That we do this conversation every day, so it's a slightly weird one. But lovely to hear your background, and looking forward to the next episode, Marc.
Thank you for joining us, not just on this podcast, but also at the firm, Josh. It's really been amazing to have you on board with your experience and perspective, and certainly the clients and service providers appreciate it too. So thank you.
Absolutely, and thank you both. It's been a pleasure, and we'll take this offline, as they say.
Great stuff. Thanks, both.